We are a go. We are recording. All right.
There's the big warning sign that it's being recorded.
You've been warned. Okay. Well, let's kick this panel off. My name is Miranda Richmond. I am the Master's Program Graduate Advisor of Record here at UTSA, and we are hosting a panel tonight with a few alumni to give potential and interested parties a glimpse into what you can do with your master's degree that you can earn from the psychology department. The careers are very varied. It's a good mixed bag, and there are some wonderful people in the psychology department who have, well, tonight it's kind of skewed toward Dr. Maria Mccameron, as we'll find out. But there are several faculty members. I forget the number of faculty members. Anybody feel free to chime in. I lost count. Who do work with master's and PhD students and produce some really fantastic scholars and researchers. So tonight, Dr. Michael Bauman will be starting us off, and then we'll go to our two alumni, Maria Mccameron and Casey Strout, and we'll let them say a little bit, and then we'll close up with our remarks as well. And if anybody has any questions, we can always field some questions either in chat, if anybody is here in the chat, or you can just speak and we can hear your voice. So without further ado, let me introduce Dr. Michael Bauman. He is a full professor here at UTSA. He's been here since 2001. Yay. His specialization is in social and organizational psychology. He is a fellow of Society for Experimental Social Psychology. I almost tumbled all over that. He has three primary areas of research, which are performance in groups, teams, and multi-team systems, substance use related to work experiences and work stress, negative attitudes towards women, for example, stereotyping and objectification. He is the former associate editor of Group Dynamics and a frequent reviewer of grant proposals for NASA and for the National Science Foundation. And so I turn it over to you.
Okay, well, thanks. So I'm one of the previous GARs. And there's been a handful of faculty here over the years who have been GAR for long stretches. So if we go all the way back to the start, from what I was piecing together today while trying to, remember all of this, all the way back at the start, it was Rich Wensloff, the late Rich Wensloff for several years, who handed it over to Maria Mccameron for several years. Stella Lopez did a several-year stretch. I looked it up, apparently an 8-year stretch, which I'm not sure why I did 8 years. And I've also been teaching one of the core first semester courses for apparently 9 years when I looked it up. And I don't want to, give short shrift to anybody else. There are a number of other folks who had shorter terms mixed in with some of these longer terms. But these were some of the folks who, if you're looking for people who were in this role for a long time, are folks you might want to reach out to. As far as background of the program, as you can probably do the math, this is 2020. This is our 25th anniversary, therefore launched in 1995. When this was launched, according to all the old paper documents on this, because that was the technology of the day, the need that we stated was twofold. One of the needs was to prepare folks for master's level research jobs, primarily in behavioral science sorts of settings. Behavioral science broadly construed. So business, health, psychology, all the things that psychology influences. The other stated goal was to provide additional training for people in the area who were interested in pursuing doctoral work in psychology, but needed a little bit more experience before they'd be strong candidates. So, for example, I know a lot of people now, when they try to find research experience, it's a little bit difficult because There are a lot of majors. There are, at the moment, 19 faculty who can take people on. Yes, I think it's 19 for a couple more months. Okay, well, that means you wouldn't necessarily find a good fit all the time. Well, this was true of a lot of the schools in San Antonio at the time, where you wouldn't necessarily find a good fit, or for people who had come over to psychology a little bit later in their academic career and needed to do a little bit of respecializing. So given those needs, the way the program was built was around kind of a research methods core, so stats and methods, with electives rounding things out so that people would have some theoretical breadth instead of just being stats and methods people. And so that they could customize their experiences a little bit, because it was always written as a general program. So in the eyes of the state, our classification code, I believe, is still general psychology as opposed to a sub area for the master's. So what it looks like in a lot of ways is a fairly traditional experimental psych curriculum with a couple of areas represented that you wouldn't normally have as options. So some of the more applied things we roll in as well. For example, part of what I do is organizational psych. Okay, that's the O and IO for folks who aren't used to decomposing the acronyms. Well, that's applied, and you wouldn't normally have that in a traditional experimental psych program, but we have it here. We also have some health, we have some clinical, we have a number of the things that are not necessarily in your traditional program, but are still research oriented, and that's our core, so we try to offer those. So the core itself, I suppose it would change a little bit depending on which year you ask and who you ask. A research design class, a measurement class, an inferential statistics class, which is mainly focusing on experimental types of designs for analysis. So ANOVA types of things, pairwise comparison types of things, and a separate correlation and regression class that is really to support more survey type designs where you have a lot more of these continuous variables instead of manipulated and categorical sorts of things. In terms of hands-on experience, there are independent study hours, which are a lot like internship hours, except you do it with a faculty member. There are internship hours that you can do off campus, and there are thesis hours. So most of our students do an empirically based thesis. They go out and do a data collection. Well, they stay in and do a data collection, but you know what I mean. And then for electives, this list changes a little bit over time, but you'll have your social psychology, your personality, your cognitive, IO's in the rotation, health is in the rotation, clinical's in the rotation, biology's in the, not biology, biopsych, sorry, is in the rotation. So you have a fairly wide range of things that you can go through. Now, historically, as is common with a lot of younger programs, the first handful of years, we kind of struggled, both to attract good students and to place them. So like a lot of programs, our early numbers, we might have a couple people a year in a cohort. It was a little bit hairy there. But pretty soon we actually started finding ourselves with enough applicants and enough people that we had to start figuring out better ways to match people to advisors. So one of the early efforts for this, the late Bob Furman, don't worry, not everybody, some of the people I'm talking about are still around. Just, now that I've done two, I don't want you to think that everybody here is, that it was a curse. Did some analyses looking at applicants' transcripts and looking for courses that seem to correlate with who was doing better or worse, so that we could update our application criteria to get a better sense of who was going to do well, instead of doing kind of the more general things we've done before. By the time I actually rotated into the GAR role, which was late last decade, so 2009, I think, we were having cohorts near 30, And program size was sometimes getting north of 60, which was an awful lot for 20 people to do. So we started pulling the size back down. And again, we looked at trying to figure out better ways to handle the application system. So we were looking at how do we give faculty more leeway to evaluate fit, more time to evaluate fit? How do we help students and applicants write their materials better so that they could show where they thought fit was? And, so we did a bunch of different things and brought the program size back down to 15 to 20 a cohort, which is really kind of where our comfort zone is with the number of faculty that we have. There have been some dips and some spikes along the way. Some other programs in the area apparently thought we were doing things well because at least one of them pretty much copied our curriculum for a few years there. And that caused a little bit of a dip for a while, but we're back up to our desired size now. And of course, over the years, we've adjusted things. So we're always trying to figure out the best way to arrange the courses that we have. So for example, once upon a time, we had our measurement class and our inferential stats class the same semester. And that gave one of our alumni just grimaced. I saw her up in the upper right. And that gave people a lot of problems because that was a heavy load for stats. And especially if they hadn't been eased back into it their first semester with something statistical, a lot of people found themselves in trouble. So we separated those. Measurement's a first semester thing now. We've made other adjustments like that. We added a class for a number of years that we had called Paradigms to give people a better idea of what the department was about, to give some more writing experience and writing feedback, and a couple of other things that were to try to help people get through the program. Eventually, we shifted that over to more of an ethics class. But, these examples aside, the main thrust of the program has remained the same. So we've stayed pretty true to the heart of it, pretty true to what the original proposal to the state said we were going to do. So the really big question here, whether or not this program is something that might be right for you. Well, so here's what we provide. We provide strong research training for the master's level. We provide individualized mentoring and research at the master's level. We provide coursework in a lot of the traditional research areas of psychology, including a couple that aren't so traditional. Our alumni have a really strong record of putting these degrees to use. So for example, over the course of the program, about 2/3 of the people who applied were interested in going on to additional education. Of those, about 2/3 successfully did. A little bit higher, bounces around a little bit year to year. Of the other third who wanted to go on to master's level research jobs, almost all of them did. Combined across continuing education, moving into a psych position upon graduation, research methods positions, consistently between 80 and 90% of the students in our master's program go on to make good use of their degree instead of going on to do something unrelated. The only thing that I would say, though, is this is a research program. So if you're looking to go on and do research, and the other things that I've said sound good, and the things that our alumni say sound good to you, then great. If you're looking to do therapy, or you're looking to be a licensed school psychologist, these are separate programs. That's not this program. UTSA has programs in that, but you have to look to a different department. And since I said how great our alumni are at getting placed, I think I should really wrap up now and let them convince you.
I think that's great. I haven't really decided who should go first. Do y'all have any preference? No? Okay. I'm just going to go with Maria, because she's in the top right corner and it's on the way. Okay, so just a little brief introduction here for Dr. Maria Mccameron. She was actually Dr. Mary McNaughton Castle's student. She graduated with her master's in 2015, and she got her PhD from Texas A&M in research, measurement, and statistics. And that's awesome. And she currently holds a position as a senior statistician at Mary Kay Global. And so I will turn this over to Dr. McCameron now. Titles.
Thanks, Miranda.
You're welcome.
So I have a short PowerPoint presentation. Well, it can be long. Kind of just to keep me on track. So let me see if I can share my screen here. Okay, host disabled screen sharing. I can go without it if. You're muted.
Well, I was also kind of mumbling to myself as I go through Zoom options,
Totally
which
cool.
is.
We'll edit this part out.
Yeah, it's right by share screen.
So I am under advanced sharing options, and I selected multiple participants can share. I'm not sure. Go to the participants and hover. Oh, thank you.
Okay, I think we're good. Thank you.
Cool. Yes.
All right. So just verification. Can you all see this?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. So I just wanted to share a little bit about me. Some of you know who I am, but just in case somebody's watching and doesn't have any idea. So I started out, well, let me start with my family first. I have an 11-month-old baby, and she keeps us up at night. So if I sound a little delirious, sleep deprivation. And a little fur baby. It's kind of a big fur baby, but he acts like he's little. So I started out my, I guess, educational journey in psychology and biology. So I didn't expect to be where I am today when I started out, but I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And as Miranda mentioned, I graduated in 2015 from UTSA with the master's program in psychology. And in 2018, I graduated my PhD from Texas A&M University in research, measurement, and statistics. Okay, so once school was over in 2018, I worked as a research analyst for Arlington ISD for a couple of years, and as a statistician now with Mary Kay. And I want to just talk a little bit about what I did for both of these roles. And if y'all have any questions at the end, I can answer that. So for research and accountability departments in school districts, that's definitely not unique to Arlington ISD. It's most big school districts have a department similar to that. The work kind of falls into two buckets, and that's accountability and research. So the accountability part has to do with pretty much the rating that the Texas Education Agency gives each school based on their students' performance. So a job of a research person in a department like that would be all about prediction. We know this information at the beginning of the year. What can we predict about how our students will perform at the end of the year? So that's the first bucket. And the second bucket is all about research. So it could be program evaluations. There is sometimes hundreds of programs at a school district. How do we know that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, that we're achieving the outcomes that we needed to be achieving? So that's the program evaluation bucket, where a research analyst will help collect data, analyze it, and see if that program is meeting the goals that were set out. And under research also falls assessment. So during the school year, the school doesn't necessarily want to wait till the end to administer something like STAR or whatever the state's requirement are. They want to kind of have these checks along the way. But to make sure that these assessments they're creating are working well and are capturing the information they need to capture, they ask people in that department I worked in to analyze the data from those assessments to make sure that they're capturing the information we need to capture. And there's also like just random research questions thrown at us all the time. It's like, how do we know a teacher is doing well? Even though they have like students from different backgrounds, different socioeconomic status, stuff like that. So just random research questions thrown at us all year long about students' performance, teachers' performances, maybe programs' performances, but not in a formal program evaluation. So that's the research analyst work that I did with Arlington ISD. The work that I do now is kind of the same, kind of different. It's the same in the sense that I'm still using the same statistical and research tools. It's different in that the unit of measurements are not students anymore. So I work with chemical or physical data. So these could be things like, we have a new product, we have a new lipstick, and we want to know if it performs the same way as the old lipstick. So does it break easily? Does it last as long? Is the color saturation the same? So I could be like working with that data to compare its performance to the old lipstick. Or it could be a completely new product and we want to see consumers' experiences. And just comparing to see if they like this new product compared to maybe other brands and things like that. So my new work now is all about like research and development of new products. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about like expectation versus reality, starting out a career path. And that was my career path starting out. I was going to get my degree in bio and psych, I was going to go to med school, residency, physician, cure cancer. That was the plan. That didn't happen. That went away. Plan B. I hated bio, loved psych. Now what? So I ended up getting the master's, going in the master's degree in UTSA. And my new plan was like, all right, I'm going to get my PhD in clinical psych, and I'm going to become a psychologist, and everybody's going to be happy. That didn't happen. And I'll talk a little bit about why that didn't happen. I fell in love with research and statistics, with not so much a specific area in psychology, but how do we come up with good research questions? How do we design good research in general? And how do we use the best statistical tools to answer those questions and have confidence in our conclusions? That's what I like the most about the program at UTSA. So that's what I ended up doing. I got my PhD in research measurement statistics, and now that's pretty much all I do is research design, statistical analysis, and making conclusions about our research questions or about our data using the best statistical analyses we have. Okay, so how did I get here? And I want to talk about the things about the program that I feel directly helped me get to where I am right now. The first big part is research design. This probably changed the way I think about not only research, but how I think about the world. It just shows you, or this class tells you how to think. It teaches you how to think, pretty much. Like when you read a research article, or even a news article that's reporting on a research article, how do you think about it? How do you evaluate if they did things right or they did things wrong? Or should you be confident in the conclusions that they made or not? And what does good research look like? So one of the things that a couple of my professors had mentioned during classes is when we're critiquing articles and trying to figure out like what they could have done better, they would ask, what did they do well? What should you do if you were in their position? And that was a really good question to ask. You learn not only what not to do, but what to do. And it sounds kind of redundant, but it's not. We get pretty confident criticizing different things and saying, oh, I wouldn't do that, or this is not the right thing to do. Well, what is the right thing to do? What is the right approach? So I learned a lot about that from research design. And I use that like right now. Anytime somebody comes to me from a different group within Mary Kay and they have this general objective, we start narrowing it down into a research question and then come up with a design and then come up with a statistical analysis plan. And that's all research design. The second part is measurement. And that's pretty much, I think Dr. Bauman touched on it a little bit when he was talking about the courses offered. But it's pretty much how do we measure the things we're interested in measuring? And when we're talking about psychological variables, it gets very, very tricky. So if I want to figure out how much somebody likes this lipstick, do I just ask them, how much do you like it? How many questions do I ask? Am I getting at the thing I'm trying to get to? So all of this falls under measurement. And I still use that now. So an example of that, we have two different surveys that are assessing preference for lipsticks, but they don't give us the same results. Are they measuring the same things? Are they tapping into completely different things? So all of these types of questions would fall under measurement. And then the last bucket would be statistics. So as Dr. Bauman mentioned, like inferential statistics, regression, and honestly, I forget what other statistics classes there were. I guess measurement could fall into that too. It teaches you what quantitative tools we have to answer our research questions. So it gives you a toolbox to answer your research questions. And that opens up a lot of doors. Sometimes people will simplify the questions they want to ask, the questions they ask, because they don't know the tools to answer the complex ones. So having that toolbox is really, really important. And that's what made me kind of want to go that route. I became fascinated with understanding the tools that we have and knowing how to properly apply them. Okay, the second part of this program is mentorship. And that has to do a lot with my advisor, Dr. McNaughton-Castle. Whenever I was like, all right, I'm getting ready to apply to PhD programs. I'm gonna apply to PhD programs in clinical psych and become a psychologist, and that's the plan. And then I was working on my thesis and proposing all of these different statistical techniques to account for stuff. And she's like, Maria, you sound really excited when you're talking about stats. You don't sound excited at all when you're talking about clinical psych. And that was the first time anybody has mentioned that to me. Like, people would always say, like, oh, you're good at stats, but nobody had noticed that before. And that was what kind of steered me towards what I like versus what I expected to be doing. So I would say that the guidance that an advisor or a mentor gives you in the program is invaluable. They can steer you in directions you didn't think you could go into or you didn't think you would like. And it can change the way your career or the way your, sorry, my computer's doing weird things, the way your career goes. The second part about mentorship is connections. They can connect you with people who can help you on your journey and give you opportunities to get more experience. So it could be like poster presentations or chances to publish articles. And those are not just good for experience, it can also help you figure out what you want to do. So one of the things that I learned about myself through that is that I don't want to go into academia. And that was a really big thing. Like, I figured that out so I can eliminate that and look at different career paths. Okay. So I guess my general advice is that wherever your career journey takes you, it's really important to be a good researcher. And that's something that the program provides. So whether you end up in a specific type of psychology or just something related to research design or analysis in general, being a good researcher is really important, because you're never going to be in a position where no questions are asked. At any time a question is asked, you should approach it like it's a research question. And the second thing is that good mentors are invaluable. And in that program, you have really good mentors. And the third thing is that a career is definitely more than just a job description. So as you're trying to figure out where you want to go next in your career path and what would help you get there, think more than just what the job description would look like. Like, what kind of schedule would you have? What kind of stability does that career give you? Do you have to move around a lot, or can you stay in your hometown? What kind of career trajectory do you have? Are you going to be stuck in the same position for a really long time, or is there a clear upward trajectory? And same with like compensation and benefits. So think about the lifestyle as a whole for the career that you end up pursuing. And the last thing is, like what you do, because if you don't like it, you'll be miserable. And that's not cool. So definitely pick something that you enjoy doing. And I was very grateful for my advisor for pushing me to do something I enjoy doing versus going down what I thought I enjoyed and kind of sticking to that plan. So it's okay to be flexible. It's okay to change your mind. And yeah, I think these are my general ones. And I think that's it. Any questions?
Well, I just have to say that advising you was incredibly easy. So it worked out, but you were a pleasure to work with. And I am always so happy to see people find something they like and to hear what you're doing. So thank you for sharing. And I'm going to be pushing a lot of my students to watch the recording of this talk just to see what you can do with our degree.
Thanks.
Did anybody have any questions right now for Maria, or should we?
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to say I was really happy that you mentioned program evaluation, because that's one of the things that I really push in when I'm teaching experimental psych, that this is something that you will always be employed. There are always programs that need to be evaluated, and you can do it with a master's degree. and students are oftentimes just intimidated by, what am I going to do? How am I going to have a job? And I'm just like, and my whole philosophy in my experimental psych classes is I'm going to teach you to be a skeptic. I'm going to teach you to question everything you hear. And that's what you've been doing. I mean, that's what it sounds like you do. So I just really appreciate that.
Thanks. Yeah, I
And
absolutely
I'm glad
agree.
to know that our program, does the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree with that program evaluation. There's any school district, especially the large one, will have hundreds of programs.
Mhm.
And there's kind of a waiting list for the program evaluation. Yeah.
Right. Any school district, any nonprofit, anybody
Absolutely.
who gets public funding, they have to justify their existence.
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
okay,
Mhm.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I also appreciated that you commented that your career path wasn't a straight line. And I think that's more often true than untrue. And it's about the journey of figuring out what makes you happy. And that relationship is not always linear. So thanks for pointing that out.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you very much. And now we will move on to Dr. Casey Strout, who is a licensed clinical psychologist and assistant professor at UT Health, and he has a joint appointment with UTSA, and his area of research interest is PTSD, or I guess it's not just research, huh? It's also clinical applications, huh? And stats, of course, right? That's what we do. But I will turn that over to Dr. Strout.
Right, so Dr. Mccameron was the good child for Dr. McNaughton, and I will hope that I was the bad child in this dynamic. So I also worked with Dr. McNaughton when I was at UTSA, and also with Dr. Bob Furman as well. So she turned her camera back on, so hopefully that's a good thing. I don't have any slides today, but I guess for me, I thought I'd talk a little bit about my trajectory and where I'm at now and how I kind of got here. And then probably try to answer, from my perspective, some of the questions that I would want to know if I was in a student's shoes, kind of like why UTSA, why their master's program. So I will certainly say that with Dr. Bauman's statement, like the path where I'm at currently does not completely fit within like the UTSA master's program, but in a lot of ways, and I guess the way I'll talk about it is that I think it does in a lot of ways, and it has absolutely helped to build me up to where I'm at. So I did my undergraduate at UTSA in psychology, and then I also pursued a master's degree in psychology through the general psychology program at UTSA. During that time, I worked with Dr. McNaughton Castle, and again, Dr. Bob Furman was my co-chair on my thesis. And so my research was broadly looking at coping. I really just want to know how people dealt with stressful situations. And I think a lot of what I learned during my time in my master's program helped to shape like ultimately what I'm interested in now, which is kind of the far end of the spectrum for stress and anxiety. And so now my research interest is really focused, and my clinical interest is on post-traumatic stress disorder. For me, after UTSA, I went on to pursue a clinical psychology doctorate degree at Nova Southeastern University. And then I spent some time doing a pre-doctoral internship at the VA on the Veterans Administration up in Pittsburgh, which brought me full circle back to San Antonio, where I completed a postdoctorate at the University of Texas Health Science Center with Strong Star and working with military health and PTSD. And now accepted an appointment there, and I work there now doing some of the same stuff I did during my postdoc. So that's kind of the trajectory. For me right now, what I primarily do, I'd say a large portion of my job is doing research, working on clinical trials, mostly for PTSD, but military health in general. So chronic pain, substance use disorders, sleep is a huge issue within the military. A lot of those things I really strongly believe the foundation for that was established at UTSA while I was in the master's program. And so for me, I really feel like Dr. Bauman mentioned and Dr. Mccameron mentioned, it's a very strong research-based program. And I think it will teach you during the course, during those courses, a lot of the core things that I think 90% of what happens in in research, the types of analyses, the types of things you'd want to be doing and knowing. And certainly since I left UTSA, there are a few analyses I picked up along the way, but I'll say even now, like predominantly what I use are some of the things, the core principles that I learned while I was at UTSA's program, going through and learning some of those statistical questions. Beyond like just the curriculum itself, I think one of the some of the strengths for UTSA's master's program is that it's a very tight-knit community. I think Dr. Bauman mentioned it's smaller classes. And so I think you really do get a lot more hands-on attention from faculty, but also interactions with your peers. And I'll say during my time at UTSA, I established some like lifelong friendships with people that I'm still in contact with who have very different trajectories from my own. So I, against Dr. Mccameron's advice, pursued a career in academia. Maybe I wish I could go back and maybe take one of those paths that she mapped out. But I'm here now. But I will say that I have many colleagues who did not pursue a doctorate degree following the master's program, pursued a different type of master's degree following the UTSA program, or went into a completely different field related to teaching or research, all these things. And these people that I keep in touch with are succeeding across the fields. And so to me, I think a huge highlight of the UTSA program is it just gives you a very broad set of skills that can be applied and utilized across a number of different disciplines. So if you have a very clear trajectory and you know, this is what I want to do, I want to be a clinical psychologist, or I want to be a research psychologist, or I want to be a statistician, that's excellent. I'm very happy for you. And I think UTSA has a lot of things that can offer you skills to reach those careers. But if you're also kind of wondering exactly where you want to go and what you want to do, and you have a couple of different trajectories you're still thinking of, I think UTSA also offers a strong base for you to be able to continue to figure out what that is, and then to pursue that in a lot of different ways. So I think those are some of the big strengths, in my opinion. Again, the stats you learn, I think, are stats that can be applied and are used very frequently across the board. So a lot of the stats, again, that I learned across inferential statistics, psychometrics, research design, inferential statistics, all those statistics I'm learning, like those are the things that are largely used in a lot of analyses and a lot of designs when you're working with things. So I think it's definitely helpful for that to be utilized. So I think that is really the extent of some of the things that I wanted to say. But I'll pause and see if people have specific questions. Be happy to answer any questions that students have.
First, I have to clarify that you are both the good children. I don't have favorites, but actually it was so nice working with you. And I like it so much that I've managed to talk him into collaborating with my lab again. So he's working on a paper with some of my current master's students, which is a nice circle as well.
Yeah.
I also want to jump in and say that, what you were saying, Dr. Strout, with going and doing clinical research, I didn't mean at all to make it sound like we don't support that.
Oh.
We support research in pretty much every area. We just don't deliver training and treatment.
Yes.
So as a stepping stone to a clinical program, oh yeah, the program's great for that. Well, I think.
I agree. Yeah, I think you're right. Maybe for me to clarify on your point as well, is it's not a therapy-based program, but the skills and tools that you learn will absolutely prepare you for a career. I think make you a stronger candidate even for clinical research. So I definitely agree with that. Thank you for clarifying that point for me as well. And I never at any point during my time at UTSA felt like I wasn't supported on that path. So good point.
And I would actually argue that a lot of the PhD programs in clinical, like the master's that we do, because they want to know you can do research. So if you get a master's in clinical or counseling, you don't stand out from the other people in your class. Dr. Strout, you can address this, but I hear back repeatedly that when people start clinical programs, they're so far ahead of everyone else in terms of the stats and the research part of the program.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I felt like coming into when I started my doctorate degree, like the skills and the classes that I had taken while I was at UTSA in the master's program, I was able to take more advanced classes early on. So in the long run, I actually gained even more knowledge than I would have had I gone straight into a doctoral program, because I had already had a solid foundation in statistics in research from UTSA. So again, I agree with that completely. I think it just added to that experience. And it's something I frequently, even to this day, still cite, that experience and how it helped me to gain even more knowledge in statistics afterwards.
Very good.
So Casey, and I'll ask a question here. Miranda, can you hear me, guys? I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah, we can.
So thanks, Casey and Maria. Wonderful, wonderful talks. You're probably the best example of the quality of our program, really, when students go out and do well for themselves, for society, and of course for UTSA. I did have a question about the thesis. So I'm assuming both of you did a thesis as opposed to a non-thesis. We have two options, and it's an integral part of the program. And I'm wondering, whether the thesis and writing the thesis and going through the hoops and the ropes contributed, you think, to your skill set, helped you ultimately get into doctoral program or snag the jobs that you wanted. I say that because I think a lot of undergraduates don't even know what a thesis is until they get into grad school or they learn from a mentor. So,
yeah, I think very briefly, it absolutely did. My first publication was my master's thesis, and I have a lot of credit for Dr. McNaughton in prepping me for that. And I think the entire process of completing a thesis helped me to be a more critical thinker. And then it always helps, especially if you're going out for job interviews or to graduate school for higher education, to be able to talk about that thesis. I really felt like that was quite an advantage for me during that process. I was going for interviews for doctoral programs, but having the ability to talk about that, to talk about the research design, the methods, and then how some of my questions in that thesis were connected to the professors that I wanted to work with. I thought all of that was very helpful for me in preparing me for that process.
good, thanks.
Definitely agree with that. I remember using my thesis, I think, as a writing sample when I was applying to some PhD programs. And my current PhD, or not my current, but my advisor at the PhD program I was in, he actually did read it. And that was something that he used as a decision, which I was surprised. I was like, oh, you've read the whole thing? Okay. But I think it's also useful not just as a writing sample or in interviews, but the whole process of having to defend your thesis or defend a dissertation later on, because that's a skill I use now. Like, I decide the analysis plan and the design of studies pretty frequently just by myself, and I continuously have to defend that design. Or if I'm recommending the collection of more data, that's more money. So I have to defend that decision and explain why it's important. So I think those skills of defending your research and defending the decisions you make are useful wherever you end up going.
Bravo, thanks.
I would agree with that totally. I will say, Casey, that probably part of your success was you'd already had to defend your proposal to Bob Furman. And everyone knows that if you've done that, there are a few questions that will trip you up.
Were genes to my defense. I'll never forget it. I'm scarred for life. Maybe that's why I went into PTSD. So I wore jeans and a nice t-shirt into my defense. And
Yep.
his first comment to me when I walked into the room was that people typically wear suits to these types of things, which immediately rattled me. It's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
He wore a suit only 3 times in his life.
Exactly.
He was messing with you.
Exactly. You know, to build on Dr. McCameron's point too, I think maybe overarching one thing that I'm noticing a thread of is I think just UTSA gives you a lot of skills in critical thinking. The process of the thesis is a lot of critical thinking. To be able to go into a room of experts and to have a prepared plan, but then to be able to defend and talk about that fluidly, I think is a strong skill to have. And I think just that one experience definitely builds you as a person and builds you as a professional and as a student.
I have a
related question to that. And I'm thinking about the audience of who might be watching this. And I'm guessing it's a lot of undergraduates who are contemplating whether they want to go on to graduate work and maybe even feeling a little intimidated because it's more advanced education. And I'm curious what you think helped make your application strong when you applied to the master's program? And then what were the factors that really helped you succeed in the master's program?
That's a good question. I don't know how to answer the first part. I don't know what made me a strong applicant without knowing, I guess, like what the application pool looks like. But I think the two things that helped me succeed in the program is I had actually reached out to Dr. Bauman before I applied, and I had like a really long list of questions about the program. So kind of know what you're getting into. I think that helps prepare you better for success and puts you in the right mindset for what type of program is this? What am I going to get out of it? And the second thing to be successful, I think, is to kind of keep an open mind. A lot of things that I learned as an undergrad, I kind of had to throw away and put new things in. It's like, I thought that's how this stats work, or I thought that's how this design work, and I had to put it out and put new stuff in. So just kind of keep an open mind and be willing to change your mindset or the way you think about research in general.
Are the materials and application, is that already very common knowledge for students potentially tuning into this? Like some of the things they need, the basic stuff, Dr. Bauman or Dr. Morissette?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
It is on the web, but there have been some issues with the web lately. I would say that something that is very important for potential applicants to do is to look and see what faculty are doing, to look and see how the program's described. Because one of the things that we do look at, so I can say what makes strong applicants. You guys have to say what you think made you strong for your next stage. But for this, strong applicants are folks who build a good case when they're writing their essays. So you might have an okay GPA, you might have okay GREs, but what we really want to know is, why are you someone who makes sense for this program? So what is it about our program that you think is going to be useful to you? What is it about you that you think is going to be a good fit for maybe faculty that you want to work with? The more you can show us that there's a fit there, the better your situation is. I mean, we're going to try real hard to figure out whether there's a fit, but the more you help us, the less likely it is that we're going to mistakenly think there's not a fit when there really is. And that's something that anybody who contacted me directly back when I was doing GAR, that was something that I would say every single time. And I think people don't realize just how important that is, especially in a program like this, where you've got people who are from a bunch of different areas, and we aren't necessarily going to understand, coming from our perspective, why you think a particular background is relevant to what we're doing.
I think I would definitely agree with that. I would say, in thinking back to my applications, one thing that I did was that I clearly stated the people that I wanted to work with and why. I remember very clearly also feeling very, I remember not being very confident, because at that point I didn't have a lot of experience. And so I was sitting there looking at these individuals with over hundreds of publications, books that they've written, CVs that I would never think I could even read. Like, I haven't written a paper as long as some people's resumes, seeing those things. And I remember being very intimidated for all that. But I'd say one thing that I would recommend to students applying is to, as Dr. Bauman said, make that connection of why it's a good fit for you. Certainly you have experience, like tell that story of your experience, but ultimately why you're a good fit for the program and who you want to work with in the program. I think that certainly can go a very, very long way. And I do remember very clearly stating I wanted to work with Dr. McNaughton-Castle because I was interested in stress. And lo and behold, maybe it was because that I didn't see what was going on behind the scenes, but that was the person that I ended up working with.
That's true. When we do look at those matches, one of the things I think is strong about our program, though, and Dr. Coyle and I have talked about this a lot, the fact that we bring undergrads and grads into our labs. And I know when Maria was there, she spent time talking to some of my undergrads about grad school, and hearing from peers while you're going through the program is helpful sometimes, because I can tell you what I think of the program, but what the person who's there tells you might seem more believable, but also makes it seem maybe more probable. I'm like them and I can do that. And I don't know, Maria, if you remember some of the undergrads then, but several of them are now off in their own grad programs. So.
Yeah, I remember one of the undergraduate students I talked to, she actually ended up taking a very similar kind of career or education path as I did. She just went to a different PhD program also in research and statistics.
Safe, right?
Natasha, I think?
Yeah. She did that. And also Safa. I think she overlapped with you some too. But
anyway. Okay.
I want to expand also on something that Dr. Acorn put in the chat, and that is that the application at the graduate level is really pretty different than the undergraduate level. And the primary difference is that you're applying to work with someone specific who has an area of specialty and an area of expertise that is related to something that you want to know or that you want to pursue in your career path. And so that match is really important. And it's important not just content-wise, but from the perspective of finding a mentor. And Maria, you mentioned that in terms of the importance of mentorship. And these are really your coaches, so to speak, your guides in terms of helping to find your way, not their way, and to help you determine what you want to do with your degree and pursue for your career.
And I think I would actually add to that, that is the single scariest part of grad school, that you are figuring out where you're going to go. So undergrad, you're on a path and you have certain degree requirements laid out. Grad school, the goal is to help figure out what you want to do. How are you going to use this stuff? Because this is a transition to independence. So, yes, the coursework is harder, but it's really just because you're thinking about things differently. So when Dr. Mccameron was talking about, having to relearn things, throw some things out, it's because now you have to use them in a different way. Instead of memorizing things like you might have done as an undergrad, now you have to think, well, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for this project? And that transition, that can be frightening, but we really do pay a lot of attention to helping you get through that. So the first semester of the program, it's a little scary. And usually by second semester, or from what I'm usually told, some of them say this in the context of no longer being in my class, that by the second semester, they've made that transition and things are starting to click. And then by third semester, and wrapping up, they have a good idea where they want to go, what they want to do, because we've helped them through that transition. So the hard part isn't, can you memorize enough or can you think enough? Is can you shift the way that you think so that you can transition from basically a knowledge consumer to a knowledge producer?
That's a great way to put it. For sure. I was making sure I'm not muted. I can't tell. I'm Zoom illiterate. We're at an hour, I believe, pretty close to an hour, not quite. I wanted to just check and see if any of the panelists had any closing remarks they wanted to make. We just kind of had a really good discussion, so I'm not sure if you have any sort of like final go get 'em type statements you want to share, but I invite you to share that now if you have it. Otherwise, it's cool.
I just want to reiterate all the fit comments that people have made. When you're looking for grad programs, think about fit. The question of, do you have the right GPA or how prestigious is a place or whatever else, all those things that people think about for undergrad, those are the wrong questions. we might not be the right fit for you, and that's okay. Think about whether they're the right fit. Think about whether we can do what you want. And if we can do or support you in you doing what you want to do, give us a closer look. If not, then yeah, if, you really do want to find someplace where the fit's better. And I know I'm not supposed to try to discourage anybody from applying to a program, right? But the reality is, if you don't fit well here, then we're not going to be able to help you as well. And we don't just want numbers, we want to be able to help you.
And I want to say that it makes me incredibly proud to see Maria and Casey, and I can remember talking with both of them about whether psych was even the right place for them and about applying to PhD programs, and to have them be colleagues now is wonderful. And thank you both for coming back and talking. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, I'd like to thank all of our panelists, Dr. Bauman, Dr. McCameron, and Dr. Strout, for joining us tonight. I really sincerely appreciate y'all's time. Cannot tell you how much I'm thankful for y'all being here and sharing your knowledge and experience with not just everybody here, but with everybody at UTSA who gets to watch this video, or outside of UTSA, because it should be posted on our website. So it's really invaluable information for incoming and interested students, and I am deeply grateful for your time. And thank you to everybody else who showed up tonight to listen. And I'll make sure everybody gets the information to share this as wide as possible. And if for anybody who is watching this, if you have questions about the program, please feel free to reach out to me. You can find my email on the website, but it is miranda.richmond@utsa.edu. And I am the GAR, so I am here to answer your questions about our program and help you find your path and support you while you're on it. So without anything left to say, I think we will end our panel, and thank you everybody else for being here, and I'm going to stop recording.